Tonight I invite you to lay aside the beliefs of the outer world and enter into the sacred theater of your own imagination. For within that inner realm, all things are made, all things are known, and all things are yours. The world you behold with your senses is but a reflection, shaped and molded by the assumptions you dare to claim as true. You may ask, how can I change my life so swiftly, so dramatically, that it seems almost unnatural? The answer is simple. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not tomorrow, not when circumstances permit. Now, at this very moment, assume the end. For what you accept inwardly, reality rushes forward to confirm. We are not here to beg, plead, or wait. We are here to become. The technique I will share tonight is not theory, not philosophy. It is a living principle. If applied faithfully, it will unfold before you with such speed that the world will call it a miracle. But you will know it is law. Let us begin not with effort, but with surrender. Not with striving, but with stillness. The unseen act of assumption is the root from which all visible things grow. And when you assume rightly, you will manifest so quickly, so precisely that it may startle even you. The power of instant assumption lies in the realization that creation is not bound by time. Everything you desire already exists in a dimension beyond the senses, waiting only for your recognition to be made manifest. This recognition happens the moment you assume it to be true. Assumption is not hoping, wishing, or asking. It is a silent inner knowing, a declaration that what you desire is already yours. Most people wait for evidence before they believe, but in the realm of imagination, belief precedes evidence. To assume instantly means to claim your desire the moment it is formed in thought, without hesitation or delay. This is not about forcing a feeling or repeating an affirmation endlessly. It is about the subtle shift within where you move from wanting to having, from questioning to certainty. When you practice instant assumption, you operate from the end. You don't concern yourself with the how or when, because in your inner world the desire is already fulfilled. The outer world must then rearrange itself to reflect this new state of being. What is seen outwardly is a shadow cast by your inner state. When you persist in that state, reality has no choice but to conform. You must understand that the law of assumption doesn't work on a time delay if it is applied purely. The delay comes from our doubts, our disbelief, and our continual return to the old state. Instant assumption bypasses these obstacles. It is a fearless act of claiming what is yours without any evidence to support it, because the only evidence you need is your own inner conviction. The speed at which things manifest is directly proportional to the intensity and clarity of your assumption. The more natural your assumption feels, the faster it hardens into fact. When you assume instantly, you declare, "This is now my reality," even if everything around you says otherwise. You are not waiting for permission from the world. You are not looking for signs. The sign is the assumption itself. Once it is made and felt, the seed is planted, and every seed contains the blueprint of the full-grown tree. This technique requires courage, because the world may not reflect your assumption immediately, but you must remain loyal to the unseen reality, knowing that it is more real than anything perceived by the senses. Instant assumption also eliminates the endless cycles of effort and doubt. Many people struggle with manifestation because they keep checking for results, which implies they haven't truly assumed the end. They are like someone who plants a seed and then digs it up every day to see if it's growing. But when you assume instantly and fully, you do so with finality. You don't revisit the old story. You don't argue with appearances. You move through life with the quiet confidence of one who knows their world is changing, because it already has. That knowing is magnetic. It draws into your experience the exact reflection of your assumption with remarkable speed. In practicing this, you must become very clear on what you want. Vague desires lead to vague results. Once your desire is clear, you step into it mentally and emotionally as though it were already true. You might do this through a scene you play out in your imagination, or through a simple declaration within yourself. But the key is that you feel it real right now. Not someday, not after you've earned it. Right now, in this moment. This is the secret to instant assumption. It does not wait for worthiness or logic. It knows that all things are possible, and that the moment you claim something is true, it begins to materialize. There is tremendous creative power in this approach, because it puts you back in the position of the operant power. You are not a victim of circumstance or a passive observer. You are the one who decrees what shall be, and the universe obeys. This technique is not about controlling the outer world directly. It is about mastering the inner world so completely that the outer world has no option but to yield. When you assume instantly, you are stepping into the creative role with boldness and clarity. You are saying it is so, and trusting that your word does not return void. There is no room for fear or doubt in this practice. If fear arises, it is a signal to return to your desired state. Not to argue with fear, but to replace it. You don't need to battle your old thoughts, you only need to occupy the new one. Instant assumption bypasses resistance because it doesn't focus on eliminating the negative. It simply ignores it and lives in the positive. You are not fixing anything. You are creating anew. The more you do this, the more natural it becomes. And soon what once felt like pretending begins to feel like truth. The mind adjusts, the emotions align, and the body responds. This internal shift is what triggers the external change. The world is always echoing your dominant assumptions. And when you assume something instantly, you send out a vibration of certainty that cannot be ignored. You'll find that opportunities arise seemingly out of nowhere. People begin to treat you differently. Solutions appear without your effort. This is not coincidence, it is law. And the faster you assume, the faster the world responds. Entering the state of the wish fulfilled is not about imagination alone. It is about embodiment. It is the deep inner act of becoming the person who already possesses what they desire, regardless of the current outer facts. When you enter this state, you shift your awareness from the lack of the desire to the presence of it. You begin to think from the desire, not of it. There is a profound difference between thinking of something you want and thinking from the state of already having it. Thinking of implies distance. It reinforces the idea that the desire is separate from you. But thinking from establishes unity. It declares that the desire and the self are one and the same right now. This mental movement from the present facts to the fulfilled end is the key that unlocks the power of imagination. It is not done through strain or force, but through inward surrender. You withdraw your attention from the senses and place it upon the unseen. You feel as though your desire is already accomplished, and then you dwell in that feeling. You walk, talk, think, and breathe as though your world has already changed. This is not acting or pretending, it is the truest form of creation, because all creation begins within. The outer world is simply a delayed reflection of what you have accepted inwardly. To enter the state of the wish fulfilled, you must allow yourself to fully detach from the current reality. This doesn't mean denying what exists. It means choosing not to be governed by it. You may still see the old conditions, but you no longer identify with them. You rise above them through the power of imagination. In your inner world, you craft scenes, feelings, and thoughts that match the reality you desire, and you live there more than you live in the physical world. That inner residence becomes your new home, and eventually the outer world must come into harmony with it. This process is most effective when done with simplicity and sincerity. You don't need elaborate techniques or rituals. A single imagined scene that implies your desire is fulfilled can be enough. The key is to make it feel real. When you feel the scene with emotional vividness, when you taste the result, hear the words, sense the satisfaction, you impress it upon your subconscious. And the subconscious, being non-selective and obedient, accepts it as fact and begins to express it outwardly. Remaining in this state requires persistence, not effort. It is about continually returning to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, especially when the outer world tempts you to react. You must resist the urge to be ruled by appearances. Every time you react to the old story, you reinforce it. But when you calmly return to your new state, even in the face of contradiction, you begin to rewrite the script of your life. You become the author rather than the reader, the creator rather than the reactor. The feeling is the secret in this process. It is the emotional acceptance of the fulfilled desire that impresses the subconscious most powerfully. Logic, reason, and outer proof are not the tools here. Feeling is. You may affirm something 1,000 times, but if it doesn't touch the feeling level, it remains hollow. But a single moment of genuine feeling, of truly entering into the desired state, can set everything into motion. Feeling bridges the gap between thought and manifestation. It speaks to the deeper part of you that actually governs your experience. Often people believe that they must wait until something happens to feel the joy, relief, or confidence they crave. But this reverses the law. It is the feeling that causes the happening. By feeling now what you would feel if the desire were true, you create the condition necessary for its expression. It is not a trick of the mind. It is a natural law, operating with precision and neutrality. You do not wait for the result to feel fulfilled, you feel fulfilled, and then the result arrives. This inner state becomes your new dwelling place. You carry it with you everywhere, not as a burden but as a quiet confidence. You wake up with it. You fall asleep in it. You converse with yourself from this state. Your inner conversations begin to match your desired end. You no longer rehearse old memories or entertain negative possibilities. Instead, your inner dialogue reflects the world you've chosen. The more you occupy this state, the more it crystallizes into reality. What you assume to be true of yourself and your life becomes your experience. Not because you are wishing for it, but because you are living it internally. The state of the wish fulfilled does not simply observe reality, it commands it. You may still take action in the world, but your actions arise from a new identity, one that knows its desire is already secured. These actions are no longer desperate or uncertain. They are aligned, intentional, and effective. They flow naturally from the state you inhabit. This process invites you to become deeply honest with yourself about what you truly want and who you truly are. It removes the layers of doubt and conditioning that have held you in old states for years. You are no longer limited by past experience or current circumstances. You are guided by the vision of what is already yours in consciousness. And as you persist in that state, the world will begin to mirror it back to you with increasing clarity and speed. Ignoring the outer world completely is perhaps the most difficult yet most essential discipline for anyone seeking to manifest their desires using the law of assumption. The senses are powerful and persistent. They present the facts of the current world so vividly that it becomes easy to mistake them for truth. But truth in the realm of creation is not determined by what is seen. It is determined by what is assumed. The outer world is nothing more than the past echo of your former inner state. It is a delayed reflection, a photograph of what you once believed. To allow it to dictate your present assumptions is to live in a loop of repetition, forever recreating the same reality over and over again. When you decide to manifest something new, you must learn to treat the outer world like a fading shadow. You stop giving it authority over your emotions, thoughts, or expectations. Even if everything around you contradicts the new assumption you are trying to maintain, you must ignore it. This does not mean that you walk through life in denial or irresponsibility. It means you recognize the illusion of permanence in appearances. You no longer argue with the facts, you simply declare them irrelevant to the new reality you have claimed. To ignore the outer world is to turn inward and remain faithful to your chosen state, as though it is more real than anything the five senses can detect. This practice is powerful because it breaks the cycle of reaction. Most people live in a constant state of reaction to what they see, hear, and experience. They are at the mercy of circumstances, always adjusting their thoughts to match the environment. But when you live this way, you are not creating, you are merely responding. To become a conscious creator, you must do the opposite. You must hold your inner vision steady regardless of what appears to be happening. If you have assumed wealth, but the bills pile up, you remain in the feeling of abundance. If you have assumed love but face rejection or silence, you dwell in the state of being deeply loved. The outer world will eventually conform, but only if you do not betray your inner world for what your eyes tell you. Ignoring the outer world requires mental discipline. It is not a passive act, but an active redirection of focus. You become the guardian of your attention. Whenever the outside tries to pull you into fear, doubt, or confusion, you return to your chosen state like a lighthouse, returning its beam to the sea. This inner steadiness begins to build a momentum, and soon your emotional reactions no longer depend on the outside. You find yourself calm, detached, and steady even in the face of chaos, because you know that reality is malleable and responsive to your assumptions. This level of mastery allows you to live in the end, even when the beginning appears to contradict it. You don't need confirmation before you commit to a new story. You give yourself the confirmation internally by feeling it real. This is where faith comes alive, not as blind belief, but as a deep inner knowing that persists without evidence. When you ignore the outer world, you are not pretending that what's happening isn't real. You are simply choosing not to give it creative power. You know that what you give your attention to grows, so you starve the old reality by refusing to feed it with your energy. As you become more practiced in this, you notice that your sense of self begins to shift. You are no longer someone waiting for change, you are the one who initiates it. You no longer feel controlled by events, people, or outcomes. You feel empowered because you know that your inner world is the source of your experiences. This shift is subtle but transformative. The world may still look the same for a time, but you are no longer the same within it. And that internal change is the first sign of true manifestation. The outer world may test you, especially in the early stages of a new assumption. Old patterns may arise. Familiar limitations may appear. These are not signs of failure. They are echoes, dissolving as you persist. It is like tuning a radio. You may still hear static from the old station, but as you hold the dial, eventually the new frequency comes through clearly. Your task is not to judge the static, but to continue tuning your inner attention to the new channel. Ignoring the outer world means not engaging with appearances that do not align with your desired state. You no longer analyze or worry about timing. You trust the process because you understand the law. This process can feel unnatural at first, especially when everything in your environment screams the opposite of what you are claiming. But with repetition, it becomes natural. You train yourself to see with the eyes of imagination rather than the eyes of habit. You begin to interact with the unseen more than the seen, and this shift begins to alter your mood, your thoughts, your actions, and eventually your reality. The outer world bends to the inner, not the other way around. When you know this deeply, you gain the ability to move through life with intention and confidence, choosing your states and remaining loyal to them no matter what the world says. Feeling as the creative cause means recognizing that your inner emotional state is not just a passive response to the world, but the very force that shapes it. Every condition, experience, or relationship that manifests in your life has its roots in a feeling that you either nurtured or accepted within yourself. This idea can be confronting because it puts the responsibility for your entire reality into your own hands. But it is also profoundly liberating because it means you are never powerless or at the mercy of circumstances. The moment you understand that feeling is the cause and not the effect, you begin to use your inner world as the workshop of creation instead of a reaction chamber to what's already been created. Most people are taught to believe that they will feel a certain way once something changes. They will feel happy once they succeed, secure once they have money, loved once someone enters their life. This backward logic keeps them trapped in a cycle of waiting, hoping, and reacting. But the truth is that the feeling must come first. It is the feeling of success that leads to opportunities, the feeling of wealth that attracts abundance, and the feeling of love that draws loving relationships. The outer world can only reflect back the mood you consistently dwell in. If you are living in a state of lack or anxiety, you will continue to experience situations that confirm that state. But if you cultivate a feeling of fulfillment, even when there is no outer reason to do so, reality begins to rearrange itself to match that vibration. Feeling is not about surface-level emotions or temporary excitement. It is about the sustained inner tone that you carry throughout your day. It is the assumption you return to again and again in quiet moments, the emotional baseline from which your thoughts arise. This is why trying to manifest through thought alone, without engaging the feeling, often leads to frustration. The subconscious mind responds not to words or logic, but to the dominant emotional state. You may be affirming abundance all day long, but if the feeling beneath it is fear of poverty, it is the fear that will be impressed and expressed. The emotional atmosphere you live in becomes the soil in which your experiences grow. To create consciously, you must begin with the feeling. Ask yourself how you would feel if the desire were already yours. Would you feel free, confident, grateful, relieved, joyful? Then begin to embody that feeling now. You do not need to wait for circumstances to validate it. You generate the feeling by entering into the scene of the fulfilled desire in your imagination, and allowing that inner world to influence your outer behavior, your choices, and your expectations. The more real that feeling becomes, the more magnetically it draws to you the conditions that correspond with it. Feeling becomes not just the cause of the manifestation, but also the evidence that it is already in progress. One of the most powerful tools in this process is the ability to return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, regardless of what is happening around you. Life may present challenges or contradictions, but you do not abandon the feeling. You become a master of emotional direction, choosing the feeling of your future instead of reacting to the feeling of your past. This inner loyalty to your chosen state is what impresses the subconscious and causes it to externalize the desire. When the feeling becomes natural, manifestation becomes inevitable. It is not a matter of effort, but of saturation. You are saturating your consciousness with the emotional reality of the fulfilled wish until it becomes your default state. This approach also demands self-awareness. You must become attuned to your own emotional patterns and be willing to shift them deliberately. If you catch yourself dwelling in fear, doubt, or resentment, you do not fight those feelings. You simply replace them with the feeling that matches your desired outcome. You are not trying to suppress anything, but to reorient your emotional energy. This is not about forced positivity or denial. It is about creative control. You decide what gets to stay in your inner world because you understand that what remains in your feeling will soon become part of your life. Feeling as the creative cause also brings a deeper understanding of identity. You begin to see that you are not just someone trying to get something. You are someone becoming the person who already has it. The feeling of being a successful person, a loved person, a powerful person must precede the external evidence. You do not wait for results to define you. You define yourself through feeling, and the results follow. This shift in identity through feeling is what creates real, lasting transformation. It is not a momentary change in mood, but a sustained change in self-concept. You no longer see yourself as separate from your desires, but as one with them. And this unity is felt emotionally long before it is seen physically. Every time you revisit the feeling of your fulfilled desire, you are strengthening the bridge between the unseen and the seen. You are communicating clearly with the subconscious, which cannot reject feeling once it is deeply impressed. You become less concerned with time or evidence, and more devoted to maintaining the inner state. This state becomes your compass, your guide and your creative force. You carry it into every situation, and gradually the world reflects it back with precision and clarity. What once felt like imagination becomes your reality, because it was always the feeling that had the power, not the world, not the facts, not even the thoughts, but the feeling that gave them life. The one-time assumption technique is based on the principle that once you fully accept something as true in your imagination, it begins to manifest without the need for repetition, effort, or reinforcement. This approach challenges the widely held belief that manifestation requires constant affirmations, visualizations, or daily rituals. Instead, it asks for a single, clear, and powerful moment of assumption, a mental event in which you completely accept your desire as already fulfilled. In that moment, there is no doubt, no waiting, no hoping. There is only inner conviction, the deep knowing that what you have imagined has already been created in the unseen and will inevitably crystallize in the visible. This technique rests on the understanding that the subconscious mind is not influenced by frequency, but by intensity and sincerity. A single assumption made with full belief and emotional saturation can impress the subconscious more effectively than weeks of mechanical repetition. The mind accepts what feels real, and if you can generate that feeling even once with complete acceptance, the seed has been planted. You don't dig it up. You don't revisit it with anxiety. You leave it alone, trusting the Lord to bring it into form in the most natural way possible. This is not passive waiting. It is confident expectancy born from a single potent inner act. For the one-time assumption to be effective, you must enter the scene of your desire with such clarity and emotional involvement that it feels like a memory, not a fantasy. You must see the world through the eyes of the version of yourself who has already received what they wanted. You become the person in that scene, not as an observer but as the experiencer. You hear the sounds, feel the emotions, sense the atmosphere and live it out fully in your imagination. And when that scene ends, you carry the feeling with you into waking life, not as something you hope will happen, but as something you are already aligned with. This process is similar to setting a course and then letting the ship sail. You don't keep turning the wheel if the direction is correct. You don't check the soil every day if the seed is sound. You trust the natural laws to do their part. This mental stillness, this refusal to interfere, is what allows the manifestation to unfold. People often sabotage their desires by constantly checking for results or by revisiting the wish from a place of lack. But the one-time assumption leaves no room for that. It assumes finality. It's a mental declaration that says this is already mine, and it closes the case emotionally and psychologically. This technique also encourages a shift in identity. You are not a seeker. You are someone who has already found. You do not return to the wish because the wish is fulfilled. You do not ask again because you already received. This mindset requires self-discipline and trust. The world may not change immediately, and the temptation to doubt may arise, but you hold your position mentally. The one-time assumption is not about repeating the state, it's about persisting in the feeling that the desire has been handled. You don't revisit the assumption, but you live in alignment with it. You speak, think, and act as if it is already true. The one-time assumption also frees you from obsession and struggle. It removes the desperation that often accompanies daily manifesting routines. There is no pressure, no fear of doing it wrong. The assumption is already made, and that is enough. This confidence magnetizes the result. You do not chase your desire, it is already attracted to your state. Your job is not to manage or force outcomes. Your job is to remain inwardly aligned with the version of you who already lives in the end. Because this technique is rooted in finality, it often brings quicker results than practices based in repetition. The reason is simple. The subconscious mind acts most powerfully when it is given a clear, unshaken directive. A decision made without doubt is a command that the universe fulfills. Most delays in manifestation come not from the process itself, but from the wavering of the individual. The one-time assumption eliminates that wavering. It brings clarity and focus to the creative act, allowing it to work unimpeded. This approach requires you to let go of all need for reassurance. Once the assumption is made, there is no more need to ask if it's working or when it will arrive. You walk forward with the quiet conviction that the work is done. This internal confidence begins to show up in subtle ways, in your tone, your posture, your decisions. People sense the shift even if they don't understand it. You begin to live in harmony with your desire, not in pursuit of it. Using this technique also cultivates emotional resilience. You are not tossed about by appearances because you know that appearances are temporary and often deceptive. You have made your assumption, and that is your truth. You stand by it no matter what. This stability creates a powerful signal to the universe that you are ready to receive. There is no confusion, no mixed energy, no inner contradiction. You are aligned, and in that alignment, the manifestation is born. The one-time assumption technique demands depth over repetition, intensity over volume, and belief over effort. It is a practice of inner authority, where your imagination becomes the birthplace of reality and your assumption becomes law. You don't negotiate with circumstances. You don't plead with the universe. You assume and you remain. This act of inner finality becomes the silent cause of visible change, unfolding in perfect time and form according to the certainty you held once, and only once, with absolute conviction. In the end, manifestation is not a matter of chance, struggle, or repetition. It is the natural outcome of conscious inner assumption. You are not here to beg life for what you want, but to boldly claim it within, knowing that your inner world is the only creative power. When you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, when you ignore the distractions of the outer world, when you feel from the end and trust that one true assumption is enough, you unlock a force that moves faster than logic, faster than effort. You are not changing the world, you are changing your state, and the world must follow. Manifesting so fast it feels almost supernatural is not a miracle. It is law, the law of assumption, operating perfectly as you align with it. Trust the feeling, commit to the state, and let the world catch up. Imagine for a moment that the world you see before you is not the cause but the effect. That what appears so real, so solid, so immovable, is nothing more than the shadow cast by your inner assumptions. The outer world, with all its seeming facts and limitations, is but a reflection of the state of consciousness you occupy. To change the world, you do not wrestle with conditions, nor do you strive to manipulate appearances. You rise instead in consciousness. You assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and live therein. In this lecture, we turn our gaze away from the shifting sands of external reality and anchor ourselves in the unchanging truth within. We explore how to ignore what is and dwell instead in what ought to be, knowing it is already so in the unseen. The senses may scream one thing, but the imagination whispers a deeper truth. And it is that truth, believed and persisted in, that will solidify into form. So let us now walk by faith and not by sight, and uncover the sacred art of manifesting a new world, not by effort but by assumption. What most people call reality is simply the echo of their past thoughts and assumptions made manifest. The world around you, with all its circumstances and appearances, is not as independent or objective as it seems. It is in truth an illusion sustained by your own inner states. This illusion, though convincing and often overwhelming, is nothing more than the outpicturing of beliefs you've previously accepted as true. The world is a mirror, faithfully reflecting the content of your consciousness, but most remain unaware of this dynamic and believe they are at the mercy of external forces. They react to what they see, not realizing that what they see is reacting to them. The outer world, though appearing separate, is intimately connected to the inner world. It is like watching a delayed broadcast. You are seeing on the screen of life only what was previously assumed in the studio of your mind. Because the world of appearances is delayed and reactive, it cannot be the source of power. It has no creative agency of its own. It simply follows the lead of what you assume to be true within yourself. If you continue to respond emotionally to what your senses report, then you remain trapped in the cycle of reproducing the same experiences over and over. The moment you acknowledge that the world outside has no reality independent of your consciousness, you begin to reclaim your power. You begin to see that nothing in your current life is fixed. Everything is malleable, changeable, subject to the dominion of imagination. You do not need to wait for conditions to change. You need only to change your concept of yourself, and the world will faithfully mirror that change. The illusion of physical reality persists, because people give it their attention, their belief, and their emotional energy. What you focus on expands, and what you emotionally invest in becomes magnetized in your experience. If you believe in lack, speak of lack, and feel the despair of lack, then lack must appear, not because the world is cruel, but because the law is precise. It brings to you not what you want, but what you are, what you feel, assume, and believe in your depths. The great secret is not to fight the appearances of the outer world, but to withdraw attention from them. Not with anger or denial, but with the quiet knowing that they have no substance unless you breathe life into them by your attention. The facts of the senses are not final. They are simply reflections of an old state, and when you shift your inner state, they must eventually dissolve and reform into something new. Most people try to change their lives by force, by action, by effort, by trying to manipulate events and people. But the world does not change because you work harder. It changes because you enter a new state of being. And the key to that transition is ignoring what is and imagining what could be as if it already were. To do this effectively, one must see the physical world for what it is, a screen upon which the movie of consciousness is projected. To stare at the screen and try to change the film is foolish. The film must be changed at the source, in the reel of the mind. This requires detachment, clarity, and most of all faith. Faith that what is imagined, believed, and emotionally accepted must come to pass, even if the present facts say otherwise. The illusion of physical reality also extends to the concept of time. Many believe that change takes time, that results are distant, that we must wait for the right moment. But time itself is a construct within consciousness. What is required is not the passage of days, but the assumption of the desired state now. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, even in the absence of physical evidence, you are rewriting the script. The world must then catch up, not because you forced it, but because the law is always working, always responding, always molding itself around the dominant impressions of your inner world. To ignore the current reality is not to deny it, but to recognize that it is not the ultimate truth. It is a passing reflection, subject to transformation through the power of awareness. Every person is living in a self-imposed reality, a world shaped not by fate but by inner conviction. The outer world is a stage, and the roles you play upon it are written in the unseen. The script can be changed at any moment, not by pleading with the world, but by assuming a new identity and allowing that identity to mold your experience. The illusion breaks when you stop believing in the permanence of things as they are. When you realize that every condition can be rewritten by consciousness, you are no longer a victim of circumstance, but a master of creation. The walls that surround you are made of thought, and they crumble the moment you stop feeding them belief. The world will reflect back to you whatever state you persist in, no matter how contrary it may appear to the current scene. Assumption is the act of inwardly accepting something as true, even in the absence of any external confirmation. It is not mere wishful thinking or vague hoping. It is the deliberate occupation of a state of consciousness in which what you desire is already so. To assume is to live inwardly from the end, to feel yourself already in possession of your ideal, regardless of appearances. This act, though simple in nature, is the very foundation of all creation, for nothing appears in the external world until it is first assumed within the mind. The moment you assume a new identity, a new reality begins to take shape, even if the outer world appears unchanged. The seed has been planted, and though invisible for a time, it must grow and blossom into form. Every event, every circumstance, every relationship in your life is the result of some assumption you have made, whether consciously or unconsciously. Most people assume things based on what they observe, thereby trapping themselves in a cycle of repeating the same conditions. They see lack and assume lack. They see rejection and assume unworthiness. They observe delay and assume disappointment. But the true creative power lies in assuming what you wish to be true, not what your senses report. The senses are slow and bound to the past. Assumption bypasses the senses and reaches directly into the causal realm. It is a spiritual act, a creative decree, a silent command that reshapes reality from the inside out. When you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you are no longer waiting for evidence, you are embodying the reality before it is visible. You begin to think from your desire instead of about it. This shift in perspective changes everything. Thinking from the end means you no longer beg or chase or hope. You simply live in the state where your desire is already fulfilled, and from that state all thoughts, actions, and emotions align with your new reality. This alignment is not forced but natural, because consciousness always expresses itself through coherence. Once you occupy a state, everything you do from that state supports and sustains it. The law does not respond to the words you speak or the rituals you perform. It responds to the assumptions you inwardly accept as true. You may affirm abundance all day, but if you assume lack, lack will persist. You may visualize success nightly, but if you feel unworthy, failure will manifest. The assumption must be sincere, felt, and lived. It is not something you try, it is something you become. Becoming is the key, for when you assume a new identity, the world must mirror it. The outer world cannot help but take shape around your inner self-concept. This is why assumption is not just important, it is everything. It is the root from which all experiences grow. There is no power outside of assumption. What you assume yourself to be determines what you experience. If you assume yourself to be sick, life will reflect sickness. If you assume yourself to be blessed, life will conspire to confirm that truth. It is not arrogance to assume greatness. It is the recognition that your imagination is the only creative power. There is no need to justify your desires or explain your assumptions to others. The world is not the source of truth, it is the mirror. The truth is within, and what you assume to be true in the silence of your heart is what the world will eventually shout from the rooftops. Many struggle with assumption because they believe they must see something to believe it. But the law of consciousness works in reverse. you must first believe it to see it. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Assumption is faith in action. It is the ability to hold to a new reality with such conviction that it becomes more real to you than the facts of the present moment. This inner conviction is not based on proof, but on the knowing that consciousness creates reality, and that the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the surest way to bring it into being. There is no effort in true assumption. It is not a struggle or a battle with the mind. It is a quiet, confident resting in the truth of your desired state. You do not need to constantly affirm or visualize if the assumption has taken root. Like a seed planted in fertile soil, the assumed state will grow of its own accord. Your job is to occupy the feeling of the fulfilled desire and live as if it were already true. This does not mean acting in the world with pretense, but moving inwardly with certainty. The world outside may still appear the same, but something has shifted within, and that inner shift is the true cause of transformation. Assumption is creative because it is inseparable from imagination. To assume something is to see it, feel it, accept it as real within your own mind. Imagination is the workshop of the soul, and assumption is the blueprint that imagination follows. When you persist in the assumption, you are continually impressing the subconscious with a new pattern, and the subconscious, being impersonal and faithful, must express it. It does not question, it does not delay, it simply obeys the command given to it by your persistent feeling. This is why persistence in assumption is so vital. A fleeting wish or passing thought has little power, but an assumption you return to daily, one you feel and live from repeatedly, becomes dominant, and the dominant state always outpictures itself. Living in the end means embodying the state of consciousness where your desire has already been fulfilled. It is not a process of hoping that something will happen in the future, but resting in the deep inner knowing that it has already happened in the unseen and is simply waiting to be revealed. When you live in the end, you walk, talk, think, and feel as though the ideal you seek is already yours. There is no longing, no begging, no waiting. Only the calm and confident awareness that the seed has been planted and the harvest is certain. This way of being is not about pretending or forcing. It is about accepting, assuming, and maintaining the emotional and mental position of the wish fulfilled. To live in the end, you must first become clear about what the end looks like for you. You do not focus on the process, the steps, or how it might unfold. You focus solely on the outcome, the final scene, the state you would occupy if your desire were a present reality. You feel into that scene with such vividness that it becomes more real to you than your current surroundings. This imagined end is not a fantasy or a mere daydream. It is the reality to which you are loyal, regardless of what your senses report. The senses may contradict it, logic may challenge it, and circumstances may oppose it, but you hold firm to the feeling of the end, knowing it must express itself because it is law. Living in the end is not about denying current conditions, but refusing to give them power over your inner state. You do not ignore responsibilities or disregard action, but you take every step from the assumption that your desire is already fulfilled. You stop reacting emotionally to temporary appearances, because you know they are only echoes of past assumptions. Your loyalty shifts from the visible to the invisible, from the facts to the truth within you. You make the unseen your reality and let the seen conform to it in due time. You no longer dwell in the gap between desire and fulfillment. You collapse the gap by dwelling in the fulfillment itself. This inner positioning affects everything about you, your decisions, your language, your posture, and your mood. When you live in the end, you do not need to prove anything to anyone, because you already possess what others believe you are still seeking. You radiate a sense of certainty and calm, not because you are arrogant, but because you are aligned with a deeper truth. You are no longer driven by fear or lack or insecurity. You are grounded in the confidence of already having. From this position, life flows more smoothly, because resistance has been replaced by alignment, and doubt has been dissolved by knowing. Living in the end also means releasing the need for constant reassurance or validation. You do not ask whether it is working or look for signs with desperation. The one who truly lives in the end does not need signs. They are the sign. They carry within them the conviction that what they desire is already theirs, and that conviction is magnetic. It draws experiences, opportunities, and people into their orbit that align with their inner state. This is not manipulation or chance. It is the natural outworking of a universal principle. You do not chase your desire. It is drawn to you because you have become its living embodiment. There is a subtle but powerful shift that occurs when you move from wanting something to being the person who already has it. You stop asking when or how, and you begin to enjoy the emotional atmosphere of fulfillment. This emotional shift is not dependent on evidence. It is self-generated, and because it is self-generated, it is sustainable. You are no longer dependent on the world to make you feel a certain way. You feel it first and the world follows. You become the source of your experience, not the victim of conditions, and this self-created emotional state is the soil in which manifestation grows. The beauty of living in the end is that it frees you from worry and struggle. You are no longer trying to make something happen. You are simply maintaining alignment with what you know is already true. This knowing is not blind optimism. It is born from the understanding that imagination creates reality, and that what you accept inwardly must express itself outwardly. You treat your inner world as the real world, and you let the outer world catch up. You remain faithful to the end, not because of willpower, but because the end feels more real to you than any temporary condition. Living in the end also requires a certain discipline of thought. You must watch what you dwell on, what you speak about, and what you allow to occupy your mind. If a thought contradicts your desired state, you let it go, not out of fear, but because it no longer serves the version of you who already has what they desire. You live each day from this new self, and over time this new self becomes second nature. You no longer have to remind yourself, or force belief. The feeling of the end becomes your dwelling place, your emotional home, and your mental default. The more you live from the end, the more effortlessly the world begins to rearrange itself to reflect your new identity. Persisting in the invisible means holding to your inner vision and assumption even when nothing in the outer world seems to support it. It is the disciplined refusal to let appearances shake your conviction in the unseen reality you have claimed. This form of persistence is not aggressive or forceful. It is quiet, steady, and unwavering. It is rooted in the understanding that consciousness creates reality, and that the invisible assumption, once accepted as true, must eventually take form. There may be no signs, no movement, no confirmation for a time, but the one who persists in the invisible does not require proof, because their faith is in the law, not in appearances. They know that the outer world is always catching up to the inner state, and if they remain loyal to the invisible, the visible must eventually mirror it. When you persist in the invisible, you are choosing to remain identified with your desire as if it were already realized. You feel it, think from it, and make it your emotional dwelling place. You do not concern yourself with how or when it will appear, because those are questions rooted in doubt. Instead, you return again and again to the inner reality, nurturing it like a gardener tends to a seed. You do not dig up the seed each day to see if it has sprouted. You water it with faith, protect it from doubt, and let the invisible process unfold. The assumption may be challenged by outer conditions, but those conditions are only the residue of past states. They have no power except the meaning you give them. If you remain unmoved, the new state must break through and reshape your world. Persistence in the invisible requires emotional control, because emotions are often the first to react to circumstances. If you let fear, worry, or discouragement take over, you are shifting out of the state you have assumed. This is why it is essential to monitor not only your thoughts but your feelings. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is the secret to sustaining the assumption, and persistence means returning to that feeling again and again, especially when the world tempts you to believe otherwise. Even a brief moment of real feeling can reignite the assumption and restore your alignment with the unseen. It is not about forcing the mind, but guiding it back gently and consistently to the truth you have chosen to live by. There is no need to convince anyone else of your desire, or explain your process. Persistence is personal and internal. It is the silent agreement between you and your imagination. The more you dwell in the invisible, the more it becomes real to you, and the less power the outer world holds over your emotional state. Eventually, what once felt like imagination begins to feel like memory. It becomes so natural and familiar that you no longer wonder if it will happen, you begin to expect it, and that expectation is a powerful creative force. The law does not respond to need or desperation, it responds to faith and persistence. Your job is not to make things happen, but to remain in the state where they have already happened. Many give up too soon, not because the desire was wrong or the law failed, but because they let go of their inner state too early. They looked for results, didn't see them, and allowed doubt to creep in. Doubt is not a passive thought, it is a state, and every state has its own outcomes. When you fall into doubt, you are no longer in the state of the wish fulfilled, and the process must reflect that shift. The good news is that you can return at any moment. The law is not punishing, it is precise. You persist not by force, but by choice. Each time you return to your assumption, you are reinforcing the blueprint that reality will eventually follow. To persist in the invisible also means to trust the process of unfolding. Manifestation is not always immediate, because it involves the rearrangement of conditions, people, and timing. But just because it is not visible does not mean it is not active. Much like a seed beneath the soil, the unseen is at work organizing and aligning all things necessary for the fulfillment of your assumption. Your persistence is the signal that tells the universe to continue its work. If you waver, the signal weakens. If you stand firm, the energy remains focused. Reality is fluid and responds to the dominant pattern of your thoughts and feelings. Persisting ensures that the pattern remains consistent long enough to crystallize into form. This practice also builds a deeper relationship with your inner self. You begin to trust your imagination more than your senses. You recognize that the invisible world within is not fiction, but the source of all experience. Your faith deepens, not through external validation, but through the inner strength that comes from staying loyal to your vision. This loyalty becomes a habit, a way of living, a posture of being. The invisible becomes your home, your refuge, your point of power. And from that invisible place, all visible things are shaped. The world may offer challenges, setbacks, or distractions, but none of these can stop a person who persists in the invisible. The truth you hold inside becomes more important than anything you encounter outside. You are no longer reacting to life, you are directing it. Each moment you spend in the assumption of the fulfilled desire is a step toward its embodiment. The longer you persist, the more natural it becomes, and what is natural must become normal, and what is normal must become visible. Detaching from sensory evidence is one of the most crucial aspects of successful manifestation, because the senses are always reporting the past. What you see, hear, and touch are reflections of old assumptions and beliefs, brought into form through the law of consciousness. They are not indicators of what is in the creative sense, but of what was in the imaginative sense. When a person truly understands this, they stop reacting emotionally to the outer world, knowing that it is merely a shadow. The senses are servants, not masters, and if you let them rule your attention, you become bound to conditions that have already been set in motion. To create something new, to bring forth a different reality, one must detach from what the senses are saying and become loyal instead to the unseen truth held within the imagination. Detachment does not mean indifference or carelessness. It means refusing to identify with appearances. You might see debt, but inwardly you claim abundance. You might feel loneliness, but within you dwell in love. The sensory world may shout facts, but you respond only to the inner feeling of your wish fulfilled. This inner discipline is not always easy, especially when the world presents problems that seem urgent or overwhelming. Yet the law remains unchanging. The outer follows the inner. If you allow the inner to remain steady, the outer must eventually yield. Sensory detachment is an act of power, a declaration that you no longer accept the evidence of the physical world as final. You accept only what aligns with your desired state and discard the rest, not with denial but with calm authority. Most people become prisoners of the five senses. They see something they don't like and immediately assume that it is permanent, that it defines their reality. They speak about what is wrong, focus on what is lacking, and thereby reinforce the very conditions they wish to escape. The senses feed the mind, and the mind feeds the senses, creating a loop that traps them in the same experience. The only way out is to break that loop through detachment. You stop feeding the senses with your emotional energy. You acknowledge what is, but you do not bow to it. You keep your inner eye fixed on what you have imagined, allowing it to be more real to you than what appears before you. This form of detachment is not cold or passive. It is highly creative. It frees your energy from reacting and redirects it toward imagining. When you are no longer impressed by appearances, you are free to impress your subconscious mind with new images, feelings, and assumptions. You live not by what the eyes see, but by what the heart knows. And that knowledge, though invisible at first, is the foundation upon which all visible things are built. You detach not because you don't care about your reality, but because you care more about creating a new one. You give your loyalty to the state you wish to experience, not the one you are temporarily observing. The senses are temporary. Imagination is eternal. What you perceive today will be gone tomorrow, but what you assume and persist in will shape the tomorrows to come. The more you practice detachment, the easier it becomes to trust the unseen. You begin to feel stable in your inner world, unaffected by the highs and lows of external life. This doesn't mean you don't act or respond. It means you act from a place of power, not panic. You move from the inner truth, not the outer chaos. You become the cause, not the effect. You walk through the world like an artist with a canvas, knowing that what is now can be painted over by what you believe within. Emotional detachment from sensory facts allows you to maintain your vibration, your inner frequency, aligned with your desire. When something undesirable shows up in your world, instead of giving it power through fear or frustration, you observe it as an echo. You remind yourself that it is not the current creative act, but the result of a past one. You then return immediately to your vision, to your end scene, to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. In doing so, you weaken the grip of the present condition and strengthen the reality of your new state. The longer you hold to the new feeling, the more the old must dissolve, for no two states can dominate your mind at the same time. The dominant one will always outpicture itself in the world of form. To detach from sensory evidence also means to become selective with your attention. You learn to turn away from conversations, media, and environments that reinforce what you no longer wish to experience. You guard your imagination like a sacred garden, allowing only those impressions that match your vision to take root. You do not ignore the world, but you no longer let it dictate your inner climate. Your attention becomes your currency, and you spend it wisely. Each time you resist the pull of appearances and return to your inner assumption, you are investing in your future reality. Over time, detachment from the senses becomes not just a technique, but a way of being. You trust your inner world more than the outer one, and this trust becomes a living faith. Faith not in wishful thinking, but in the creative power of consciousness. You realize that everything you see now was once unseen, and that by staying faithful to the invisible, you are shaping what will soon be visible. The detachment becomes joyful because it affirms your role as creator, not victim. You no longer fear conditions because you know you can change them. You no longer chase outcomes because you are now aligned with the source of all outcomes. And in this awareness, the need to control fades, replaced by the calm knowing that your inner world is the only reality you ever need to master. Shifting states of consciousness is the true key to transforming your life, because every experience you have ever lived has been the result of the state you are occupying at that moment. A state is not merely a mood or an emotional wave. It is a total way of being, a combination of thoughts, beliefs, feelings, reactions, and assumptions that together create a particular identity. Each state expresses itself through your behaviors, decisions, relationships, and conditions, and it contains within it everything that is necessary to sustain and perpetuate its own reality. Just like tuning a radio to a specific frequency, when you occupy a certain state, you can only receive the experiences that match that frequency. You do not need to change the outer world. You only need to change the state from which you are living, and the world will rearrange itself accordingly. People unknowingly move in and out of states all the time, often triggered by their environment or past experiences. One moment they feel empowered, the next they feel defeated, and without understanding the law of states, they assume that these fluctuations are caused by life itself. In truth, life only mirrors the state you are presently in. If you are in a state of lack, you see more lack. If you are in a state of confidence, everything seems to flow. The state determines your perception, and perception determines your reaction, and reaction perpetuates the state. This loop continues until you consciously choose to break it by moving into a new state of consciousness. And this movement is not external, it is internal, invisible, but powerful. To shift states deliberately requires imagination and feeling. It begins by identifying the state you wish to occupy. You ask yourself, who would I be if my desire were already fulfilled? And then you begin to inwardly answer that question with images, thoughts, and most importantly, feelings. You do not just think about the new state. You enter into it. You become one with it. You see the world through its eyes. You allow yourself to feel the emotions you would naturally feel if that were your reality right now. This act of internal relocation is not fantasy, it is creation. Consciousness is the only reality, and when you change your consciousness, you change everything else by law. The state you move into begins to reflect itself subtly at first. You may notice a change in your thoughts, in your posture, in your choices. People may start to treat you differently. New opportunities may emerge, and certain problems may begin to resolve themselves without effort. These are not coincidences, they are the natural outflow of a new state. Each state has its own network of events, and once you shift, those events are drawn to you by law. The world is not outside of you, it is within you, expressing the contents of your current state. What appears to be happening to you is actually coming through you, shaped by the identity you are embodying at the time. Shifting states also means letting go of the old. You cannot be in two states at once. If you are stepping into abundance, you must release the identity of scarcity. If you are assuming health, you must let go of the identity of being sick. These old identities may be familiar, even comforting in their predictability, but they cannot serve you in your new reality. Holding on to the old while trying to claim the new creates inner conflict and blocks manifestation. To fully occupy a new state, you must abandon the former one completely. This requires trust, not in external events, but in the unseen law that governs all things. You trust that your new state, once assumed, will find expression without your needing to force or chase it. This shift is not about acting or pretending, it is about being. There is no need to mimic the behavior of someone successful if you do not feel successful. The outer behavior means nothing without the inner conviction. True change comes from identity, not performance. When you change the root, your self-concept, your assumed identity, the fruit changes automatically. You do not need to fix everything in your world. You only need to change your state, and the world will mirror the change without resistance. The effort you once spent struggling to fix problems can now be directed toward maintaining your desired state, for that is the only thing you truly have control over. Living consciously means becoming aware of your states and choosing them deliberately. You no longer leave your inner world to chance or habit. You wake each day and decide which state you will live from. You return to it throughout the day when old reactions try to pull you back. You cultivate it like a garden, feeding it with attention, watering it with emotion, protecting it from contrary thoughts. You no longer wait for the world to give you a reason to feel a certain way. You decide to feel that way now, knowing that the world will eventually match your decision. This is the true power of free will, not the power to change events directly, but the power to choose your state and let that state shape your world. The more you practice shifting states, the easier it becomes. At first, it may feel unnatural or even delusional to claim an identity that your senses do not yet confirm. But persistence dissolves resistance. Repetition builds familiarity, and soon the new state feels like home. From that place, manifestation becomes effortless, because you are no longer trying to become something. You are already it. You think as the person you desire to be, feel as they would feel, act as they would act, and live in the world that reflects their reality. This is not magic, it is law. The law that whatever you are conscious of being must externalize itself, and that every state of consciousness has its own world, waiting to be entered by the one who dares to assume it. In the end, the journey of manifestation is not about struggling against the world or forcing reality to change. It is about mastering the inner world, where all true creation begins. Your current reality is not a prison, but a projection, a mirror of your own assumptions, states, and inner convictions. When you learn to ignore appearances, assume boldly, live in the end, persist in the unseen, detach from sensory evidence, and shift states of consciousness with purpose, you unlock the divine creative power within you. You are not here to react to life, but to create it consciously. The world will always reflect who you are being. Choose your state wisely, remain loyal to your inner vision, and trust the unseen, because that is where all true power resides. You must begin with the end in mind, not the end in fear, not the end in uncertainty, but the end clothed in assurance. Imagine right now that life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a script you are writing, and in this script, everything always works out for you. Not sometimes, not in rare moments of grace, but always. Every event bends toward your benefit. Every circumstance rearranges itself for your elevation. And even what seems like delay is simply preparation in disguise. You were never meant to be a victim of life. You are the author. You were never meant to react endlessly to circumstances. You were meant to create them. When you act as if everything always works out for you, you are not hoping, you are knowing. You walk into rooms expecting favor. You face obstacles with an inner calm because you know they are stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. The world begins to reflect your inner conviction. The mirror cannot reflect what the face refuses to show. You cannot plant a seed and keep doubting its growth. The gardener does not dig up the soil every day to check if the roots are taking hold. He waters it, he nourishes it, and he waits, because he knows. That is the level of certainty you must bring to your imagination. Assume the result. Wear the feeling of everything working out. Let it sink into your bones until it becomes your natural response, until it is no longer something you practice. It is simply who you are. The person who walks by faith does not require proof. They live in the end. They feel the joy of a resolved problem, even while others still see chaos. They dance in celebration, while others mourn in doubt. Because to act as if everything works out for you is not delusion, it is creation. You're not ignoring facts, you're commanding them. You're not blind to reality, you are shaping it. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. You are aligning yourself with the truth that consciousness is the only reality, that what you accept within must be mirrored without. So if you can truly accept deeply and completely that life bends in your favor, then life must obey. The bridge of incidents will form, people will show up, conversations will unfold, doors will open, not because you forced them, but because you became the version of yourself for whom these things naturally happen. When something appears to go wrong, you don't panic. You persist. You return to the state of knowing. You return to the end where it already worked out. You walk through the storm holding the feeling of sunlight on your face. And in time, the storm dissipates, and your inner world becomes your outer world. To act as if everything works out for you is to carry peace into battle, clarity into confusion, certainty into unknowns. It is to whisper to yourself in silence, I already have what I desire. I already am who I desire to be. And then watch as life rearranges itself, not in rebellion, but in obedience to your inner law. So don't just believe in miracles, expect them. Don't just visualize a better life, embody it. Don't just wish things were better, act as though they already are. Because the moment you accept that everything always works out for you, is to occupy the state where the universe has already fulfilled, but to catch up. It is not a wishful stance nor a hopeful one. It is a knowing. It is the difference between longing for something and having it. And the mind, when properly disciplined, can create this internal certainty with such clarity that the outer world must conform to it. Living from the end is not about changing the world through effort. It is about changing yourself inwardly to the point where the world reflects your new state. When you truly dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, your conversations change, your posture shifts, your expectations rise, and your energy becomes unmistakable. People feel it, opportunities sense it, and reality begins to rearrange itself accordingly. This inner stance is not something you turn on and off like a switch. It becomes your natural identity. You no longer say, I hope this happens, but instead, I'm thankful it already has. You begin to see yourself as someone who simply lives in the blessing. There's no begging, no bargaining with life. There's only calm authority, an inner calmness that flows from knowing how things end before they begin. Because when you dwell in the end, you know that the ending is certain. You feel the peace of answered prayer, even if the world hasn't yet delivered the package. It's already yours in consciousness, and what is yours in consciousness must become yours in form. People often get caught up in asking how something will happen, but when you live from the end, you never concern yourself with how. The how is never your domain. The how belongs to the unseen laws that govern this universe, and those laws respond only to your assumption, not your anxiety. When you live from the end, you understand that your only job is to feel the end as real, to see yourself there so vividly that the means to get there must arise naturally. You become like the actor who embodies a role so deeply, the performance is no longer acting. It is truth. You don't pretend to be wealthy, healed, loved, or successful. You simply walk, breathe, and exist in the assumption that you already are. Think of a person lost in a beautiful dream. In the dream, they walk the streets of a new city, feel the sun on their skin, hear the voices of people congratulating them, experience the joy of success or reunion. While dreaming, it all feels real. The body may still be in bed, but the soul is already there. This is the same principle. You live in the dream, not to escape reality, but to create it. Your outer life begins to organize itself around the internal dream, and over time, the dream hardens into fact. This is not fantasy. It is the law of life. You may look around and not yet see the evidence. Your bank account may not yet show the numbers. The people you wish to connect with may not have called. the health you imagine may not yet show in your body. But that's irrelevant. The truth is not what the senses report. The truth is what you've accepted as real within. The outer world is a mirror, delayed but faithful. It reflects what you hold inside. So when you live from the end, you're not waiting. You are aligning. You are tuning your soul to the station of fulfillment. And like a radio, you only hear what you're tuned into. Tune into disappointment, and life will echo it. Tune into gratitude for already having, and life will echo that. Living from the end requires discipline of attention. It means refusing to react to appearances. It means denying the evidence of the senses when they contradict your assumption. This is not denial of reality, but selection of reality. For in a world of infinite possibilities, the one you most persistently imagine is the one that manifests. You must remind yourself, again and again, that your world is not shaped by what you observe, but by what you accept. Acceptance is the key. When you accept a state as yours, you move into it effortlessly. And once you've moved into the state, the details fill in around you. Life fills in the blanks. People show up. Coincidences occur. You find yourself at the right place at the right time, saying the right thing. And it feels so natural that you may forget you ever imagined it first. Living from the end is also an act of detachment, not from your desire, but from the lack of it. You stop checking for signs. You stop questioning when it will happen. You stop comparing your journey to others. You walk as if it's already done. You smile for no reason. You breathe easier. You let go of the strain and step into the joy of the fulfilled version of yourself. You don't chase, you attract, because the fulfilled version of you does not chase. The fulfilled version of you is magnetic. It draws people, events, and circumstances that match the state. And this drawing power comes not from willpower, but from inner certainty. The world responds most powerfully to those who have nothing to prove. And when you live from the end, you become that kind of person. You no longer defend your worth. You no longer seek permission. You no longer wait for external validation. You are enough. You are whole. You are already there. And the world, as it must, adjusts itself to your assumption. You find that people start treating you differently, not because they've changed, but because your inner stance has. You see new doors open, not because you begged for them, but because you were already walking through them in imagination long before they appeared. So living from the end is not a practice you do once a day. It's a state you dwell in. It's not about repeating affirmations for a few minutes and returning to fear. It's about staying in the feeling of the end until it becomes so natural that anything contrary to it feels foreign. The moment you truly dwell in the end is the moment your inner world begins to command the outer. And from that place, all things must unfold, not as effort, but as expression of who you now are. Inner conviction is the quiet force that shapes everything. It is not loud, not boastful, not theatrical. It moves silently beneath the surface, yet it determines the entire flow of your life. What you deeply believe, what you accept without question, becomes the foundation of every experience you encounter. When you carry the unwavering assumption that everything always works out for you, this inner certainty starts to color how you walk, how you speak, how you interpret events, and how others respond to you. Reality, as solid as it may seem, is far more malleable than most realize. It does not operate independently of your inner world. It follows it. This is the great secret most never discover, that belief is not passive, it is creative. What you believe about yourself and your life forms the blueprint upon which reality is built. If you believe that you're unlucky, unsupported, or doomed to struggle, your world begins to echo that belief back to you in countless ways. It's not a punishment. It's a mirror. And when you shift the belief, when you begin to accept deeply and fully that everything is conspiring for your good, then the mirror must shift its reflection too. Not immediately perhaps, but inevitably. Inner conviction rewrites outer reality because the outer is not the cause, it is the effect, and your dominant feeling, the persistent mood you carry, is the signal that informs what life must send back. People often wait for proof before they believe, but life doesn't work like that. Waiting to see something before believing it is like refusing to turn on a lamp until the room lights up by itself. The light of your belief comes first. It illuminates the path ahead, and if your inner world radiates the certainty that everything works out for you, life will have no choice but to align with that truth. Not because you manipulated it, but because you became one with the reality you desired. You moved into the state where all is well, and that state becomes your home. And as with any home, what you dwell in eventually defines you. It doesn't matter how many times things have gone wrong in your past. It doesn't matter how long you felt stuck. The past has no power unless you give it permission. The only thing that matters is what you accept as true right now. Right now, you can decide that from this moment forward, life bends toward your highest good. You can decide that your desires are valid, that your goals are achievable, and that your path is guided, even when you don't see how. And when that decision becomes a conviction, it starts to alter your emotional responses, your interpretations of setbacks, and your interactions with others. What once looked like a barrier now looks like a blessing in disguise. What once triggered anxiety now awakens trust. The world hasn't changed. Inner conviction is not something you force. And so the world must reflect. It is something you cultivate. It grows stronger every time you return to the vision of your fulfilled desire. Every time you feel it real. Every time you assume it's done. Every time you act from the state of already having it. It takes root deeper within you. And eventually it becomes so real on the inside that any lack of evidence on the outside no longer bothers you. You stop reacting, you stop explaining yourself, you stop needing validation. You rest in the knowing. You stop trying to figure it all out because you trust that it's already working out. And that trust becomes a magnet. It draws the exact circumstances, people, and opportunities that match your inner state. Some will call this delusion. They will say you're ignoring facts. But in truth, you're choosing which facts to energize. You're choosing which reality to invest your belief in. Because even facts are not final. They are temporary appearances shaped by prior assumptions. And what you assume now begins the creation of new facts. So why not assume the best? Why not walk in the conviction that the universe is rigged in your favor? Why not carry the sense that you are always in the right place at the right time, that every delay is divine timing, and that every closed door is redirection, not rejection? This is not a mindset you apply selectively. It is a life you embody. It's how you move through your day. You wake up expecting goodness. You go to sleep trusting that things are unfolding. You interpret detours as divine setups. You stop taking things personally because you know that what is truly yours cannot miss you. And even in moments of discomfort, you hold to your inner truth. Everything works out for me. Not because I'm lucky, not because I'm special in the eyes of the world, but because I've chosen to live in alignment with the reality I've imagined. I've chosen to assume that my life flows in harmony with my highest good. And that assumption is enough. The truth is, life will always reflect your strongest assumptions. And if you make the conviction that all things work in your favor, your dominant inner state, then the evidence will come, not to convince you, but to celebrate with you. You'll look around one day and realize that everything is different. Not because the world changed first, but because you did. Your thoughts softened, your beliefs elevated, emotional tone shifted from fear to faith. And as your inner garden blossomed, so too did the outer. This is the sacred art of living with conviction, not blind faith but felt reality. It is the difference between hoping and knowing. And once you truly know, you no longer chase results. You rest in your inner certainty, and life, as it must, rises to meet you there. Persistence is the quiet strength that moves mountains, even when no one sees it happening. It is the invisible decision to remain loyal to your vision, even when your senses scream otherwise. When you walk in the assumption that everything always works out for you, the world might not immediately agree. It may present situations that seem contrary. It may offer delays, detours, or silence. But none of these appearances matter to the one who truly understands the power of persistence. Because you are not seeking evidence, you are creating it. You are not waiting for life to approve your dream, you are living from the conviction that it is already done. And in this space of inner authority, persistence is no longer effort. It becomes a form of alignment. Those who truly manifest the life they desire are not necessarily the most talented, lucky, or well-connected. They are the ones who persist in the unseen. They hold their inner stance, regardless of outer noise. They remain rooted in their belief, not because circumstances are favorable, but because they know the seed has already been planted. And they don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. They water it with faith, they shine light on it with gratitude, and they persist, not because they are forcing the outcome, but because they have already accepted it as real. When appearances contradict your desire, that is the moment your faith is tested. It's easy to believe when the signs are everywhere. But real transformation happens when nothing seems to support your belief, and you still choose to persist. You still choose to feel as though it's already done. You still walk with the same confidence, speak with the same assurance, and carry the same peace. Because to you, the end is already written. The outer world is simply catching up. Persistence is the refusal to be distracted by temporary appearances. It is the inner discipline that says, I will not abandon the reality I have imagined just because the present moment doesn't reflect it yet. You understand that the outer world is delayed. It is not the source, it is the echo. And the echo always comes after the sound. So you keep speaking the language of your fulfilled desire. You keep living in the feeling of it. And eventually the echo arrives. This is not about repetition for the sake of repetition. It's about saturation. It's about saturating your mind with the image and feeling of your fulfilled state until it becomes your natural mood, until it becomes more real to you than what your eyes see. That is the moment when manifestation becomes inevitable, because your internal world is no longer reacting to the external, it is leading it. But there are moments when doubt will whisper in your ear, asking you to be realistic, asking you to lower your expectations. But if you surrender to doubt, you step out of the creative state. You hand over your power to the external world and ask it to tell you what is possible. But when you persist, you stay rooted in the truth that you are the operant power, that nothing moves in your world unless it moves through you first. So even when your heart trembles and the evidence is absent, you do not waver. You persist in the assumption that everything works out for you because you know it's already true in the unseen. To persist is to carry peace into chaos. It is to smile at what once triggered panic. It is to remain unmoved while the world reorganizes itself to mirror your belief. Because persistence does not demand, it knows. It does not strive, it allows. And it does not chase. There is a stillness that comes with true persistence. You no longer obsess over how things will unfold. You no longer need constant reassurance. You have gone beyond the need for signs because you have become the sign. Your inner world is so saturated with the end result that any deviation feels temporary. You know it's all part of the unfolding. You don't rush the process. You trust it. And in that trust, your energy becomes magnetic. You draw what you need without effort because your conviction is now the dominant vibration. People often mistake waiting for persistence, but waiting is passive. Persistence is active, but not in the way of striving or chasing. It's active in your consciousness. You remain mentally faithful to the state of the wish fulfilled. That is the true work. And it's not always glamorous. It's done in silence. It's done in solitude. It's done when no one is watching. But it's the most powerful act you can perform. Your reality does not respond to fleeting desire. It responds to persistent assumption. The assumption you return to again and again becomes the seed that life nourishes. And even when storms come, you hold steady. You do not interpret difficulty as denial. You interpret it as refinement, as preparation, as the sculpting of your character to match your desire. And you persist, not because you're forcing your will on the world, but because you've already received it in your spirit. And what is received within must be expressed without. Think of the artist who sees the final painting before the first stroke is made. The painting lives within him. He persists through each stage, not because he hopes it will become what he sees, but because he already sees it as complete. Every stroke is an act of faith. Every brush is a declaration of the finished work. That is how you must live. Every action, every thought, every word, let them all be born from the vision of the fulfilled state. Persistence becomes your posture. It becomes your home. And from that home, you begin to view life differently. You no longer panic at setbacks. You no longer fear delays. You see each moment as working in your favor, even if it disguises itself as resistance. Because you are not reacting to life, you're commanding it. And you command it by persisting in your chosen state. The world will test your resolve. It will ask if you really believe. And your answer is not in your words. It's in your persistence. It's in the quiet confidence you carry when nothing around you seems to agree. That is when the shift begins. That is when the unseen starts to move. Because you dared to hold the vision. You dared to stay faithful to the unseen. And life, as it must, bows to the one who does not waver. Your imagination is not a passive daydreaming machine. It is the divine tool through which reality is formed. It is not something to be used occasionally when you're trying to escape life. It is the very power that designs life. Everything you experience now was first born in someone's imagination, whether it was conscious or unconscious. Every building you see, every system you operate in, every relationship dynamic you find yourself in, it all began as an idea, as a mental image, held with enough focus and emotion that it found its way into form. When you begin to understand that your imagination is not just for fantasy but for function, everything changes. You start to approach your inner world with reverence. You begin to treat your thoughts like seeds and your feelings like the soil they grow in. Most people imagine by default, not by design. They rehearse worry instead of success. They visualize worst-case scenarios and call it being realistic. But they do not realize that the universe does not judge whether your imagination is used for fear or for faith. It simply responds to the dominant vision you hold. If you constantly imagine things going wrong, doors closing, people turning against you, then you are scripting that outcome. You are writing a play that life will be forced to perform. But the moment you flip that script, When you imagine victory, harmony, progress, abundance, then you begin to reshape the story. What you consistently imagine begins to sink into your subconscious mind. And once the subconscious accepts it, it becomes automatic. Your reactions change, your mood changes, your energy shifts. You start to speak from a different place, walk differently, think differently. And all of it flows from the blueprint you carry within. The subconscious is not creative, it is obedient. It does not argue, it executes. And what it executes is the plan you give it, over and over, in vivid emotional imagination. You must remember that imagination is not fantasy. It is rehearsal. It is preparation. It is construction. When you imagine yourself as confident, healthy, successful, and deeply at peace, you are not escaping reality. You are building it. The outer world has no choice but to reflect what you have already completed inwardly. So many people exhaust themselves trying to manipulate the external world. They chase relationships. They beg for opportunities. They seek validation. But they do not realize that the external is only a reflection. It has no power of its own. You do not need to beg the mirror to show a different face. You need to change the expression you are wearing. When you adjust your internal image, the mirror has no choice. It reflects you instantly. This is how reality works. If you hold a self-image of being unloved, unsupported, or unsuccessful, then life must echo that back to you. It is not cruelty. It is law. And that same law will work for you, not against you. The moment you begin to consistently imagine yourself as you wish to be. To do this properly, you must learn to quiet the outer world. You must find moments to withdraw from the noise, from the chatter of doubt, from the opinions of others. In stillness, your imagination becomes sharp. You can hear your inner voice again. You can feel the truth of what you desire, and in that space you begin to feel the scene of your fulfilled wish. Not watch it like a movie, but feel it as though it's real. What would it feel like if you were already there? What would you see? What would you hear? Who would you be? These are not just questions, they are invitations. And as you accept the invitation to live in the end, your imagination starts to take form. It becomes your home. You live from that state, not just in meditation, but in waking life. People who understand the power of imagination stop reacting to the world. They become deliberate creators. They do not concern themselves with how something will come. They focus only on assuming it already has. The how is not their job. The how belongs to the same intelligence that grows trees, orchestrates the stars, and beats your heart without you thinking about it. You are not meant to micromanage life. You are meant to imagine it into being and then live in alignment with that image. When you do, life bends to meet you where you stand. Your imagination is also your sanctuary. In times of disappointment or confusion, it offers you a safe space to recalibrate. You can return to your inner world, rebuild the scene, and step back into the feeling of fulfillment. It is not about ignoring problems. It is about remembering your power. When something outside doesn't go your way, you don't spiral, you go within. You revise the moment, you create a new outcome in imagination. And if you remain faithful to that image, the world adjusts. It has no choice. You must become emotionally involved with your imagined scene. Feel it so deeply that it becomes more real than your current conditions. That feeling is the fuel. Without feeling, imagination is lifeless. But when emotion and imagination merge, creation begins. The subconscious accepts the seen as fact, and circumstances start to move. The bridge of incidents begins to form. People enter your life, conversations change, coincidences begin to happen. But to the one who imagined it, none of this feels surprising, because they already lived it first in consciousness. Even when nothing seems to be changing, you must continue imagining, continue believing, continue holding the vision. Reality often takes time to catch up to the frequency of your inner world, but it always does. The key is to stay faithful, to hold the image with the same emotion and certainty regardless of appearances. Because appearances are not the truth. Your inner world is the truth, and your imagination is the creative workshop where all things begin. There is no limit to what you can create when you understand this. You can rewrite your past, reshape your present, and pre-design your future. You are never stuck, you are never trapped. You are simply imagining the same things over and over. Change the image and life follows. Train yourself to dwell only on what you want to experience. Starve the images of lack, fear, and failure. Nourish the visions of love, success, and peace. And above all, remember this: your imagination is sacred. It is not make-believe. It is the blueprint of your destiny. Treat it with the power and respect it deserves, and it will return to you a life beyond your wildest dreams. Feeling is the engine behind all creation. It is the invisible current that turns mental pictures into living experiences. You may speak affirmations all day, think positive thoughts, or recite beautiful phrases, but if they lack feeling, they are hollow. It is not the words alone that carry power, it is the emotional energy behind them. Feeling is what signals to the subconscious mind that something is real. And once the subconscious accepts it as real, it begins to move everything necessary to make that reality visible. When you act as if everything always works out for you, it cannot remain an intellectual exercise. It must be felt in your bones, in your breath, in the rhythm of your daily life. That feeling of security, that confidence, that joy of already being where you want to be, that is what transforms a desire into destiny. Most people confuse desire with belief. They want something badly, but they don't feel it as true. They think about the things they hope will happen, but inside they still feel lack, they still feel worry, they still feel doubt. And so the signal they send into the universe is one of absence, not fulfillment. The feeling of wanting is not the same as the feeling of having. The feeling of hope is not the same as the feeling of certainty. You must shift from craving something outside of you to experiencing it within you. That's the secret. You must learn to conjure the emotional state of your desire fulfilled and rest there, not just for a moment, but long enough that it becomes your new normal. This is not pretending, this is not tricking yourself or playing make-believe. This is embodying a truth before the world can confirm it. This is about stepping into the role of the version of you for whom the outcome is already settled. You don't need to prove anything, you don't need to force it. You simply live from the feeling that it is already done. And this feeling then begins to orchestrate circumstances in your favor. Doors open, paths clear. Things that once felt stuck begin to shift. But all of it happens as a reflection of your inner state. Life mirrors the vibration you carry, not occasionally, but constantly. Feeling is the secret because it is the evidence of belief. You don't have to say you believe if you feel that you already have it. You must ask yourself, how would I feel right now if everything truly worked out for me? What would my body feel like? What would I stop worrying about? How would I walk into a room? What kind of energy would I give off? That's where the transformation begins. Not in some distant future, but right now, in the way you carry yourself. Begin to feel the relief, the joy, the ease, and the celebration of a life that supports you. When you live in that feeling, you become a magnet for everything that matches it. So many people live in the feeling of frustration, of confusion, of fear, and then wonder why their life reflects it. But they have not yet learned to cultivate the emotional atmosphere of fulfillment. They wait for something outside to make them feel good, instead of realizing that feeling good is what brings the outside change. The cause is always internal. And when you learn to control your inner weather, the outer climate begins to cooperate. It's not that challenges stop coming, but your response to them changes. You meet them with grace, because your feeling remains steady. Your emotional state becomes anchored, not in circumstances, but in truth. Even when things appear to go wrong, even when outcomes seem delayed, you return to the feeling, you return to the knowing that all things are working out. And in that place, peace is restored. That peace becomes your power. You stop rushing, stop forcing, stop doubting. You begin to carry a quiet confidence that others can feel, even if they don't understand it. That is the power of felt truth. It doesn't require defense. It simply is. Feeling also has the power to bypass logic. You may not know how things will happen. You may not have the full picture, but if you feel it real, you don't need all the answers. You rest in the assurance that the answers will come. The mind loves logic and structure, but the heart knows what is real, even without explanation. When the feeling is strong, the mind begins to